Bradley Gottfried will present who were the best and worst generals at Gettysburg. Bradley Gottfried is currently president of the College of Southern Maryland. Although he holds a PhD in zoology, he is an avid Civil War researcher and writer. He has written 9 books on the Civil War, including 5 on the Battle of Gettysburg and 2 unit histories. He's now using his cartography skills to illustrate all the campaigns in the Eastern Theater. He's completed books on the first Bull campaign, the Maryland campaign, and the Gettysburg campaign. His 4th map book, which will be published this fall, will cover the events occurring after the Gettysburg campaign. He's currently completing a volume on the Wilderness Campaign, and 2 other books are planned to be completed over regarding the Overland Campaign. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Bradley Gottfried.
Wow. It's great to see so many people here today. I thought we'd end today with some controversy. And if I don't tick everyone off by the end of the day, I have not succeeded. So this is a very personal viewpoint on who I believe are the best and the worst. And it's okay for you to disagree with me, because that's what makes it fun. As you heard, I have written a number of books on Gettysburg. Probably most of what I'm going to be talking today comes from a book by the name of The Brigades of Gettysburg, where I spent years learning and studying about every unit, infantry unit, in both armies. So, why don't we start with some generalities, and we'll probably even disagree in terms of what are the traits of an effective leader. Can you all hear me in the back? Okay, if I start to mumble, just raise your hand, okay? And if you don't agree, just, you can shake a fist as well. I'm okay with that too. Okay, so what are some of the characteristics? Think about generals now. Obviously, it can apply to business leaders, educational leaders. It could be of any kind of individual that's a leader. And let's just go through some of these very quickly. Obviously, on a battlefield, gathering information is so critically important. And a good, effective commander is someone who's going to be able to gather information from a variety of sources, put it all together into a cohesive, yes, now I know what the enemy is doing. And one of the reasons why Robert E. Lee was so effective, maybe not so much at Gettysburg, but on other battlefields, is he was able to integrate. He had the mind that could integrate all these bits of information, and he could figure out where the Union Army was and what it was planning on doing. Obviously, knowledge. We're going to see some commanders on this battlefield who had very little experience. They had very little knowledge, and in many cases, they paid the price. Effective planner. Not only having the information, not only having the knowledge, but being able to effectively plan how do you use your regiments, your brigades, your divisions, to ensure that there's going to be an effective victory. Effective use of resources, and really the two go effectively together. Decisiveness, and we're going to see this time and time again. Some of the most effective leaders, no matter what walk of way of life they are, how decisive, how certain are they that this is the right move at the right time. Obviously, courage. The ability not only to do what you believe is the right thing to do, but to inspire the confidence in your men, and not just your men, but also the person that you're reporting to, because many of these men are going to be reporting to others. Obviously, tenacious. Not only coming up with a good plan, not only having all the resources in the right spot, but oftentimes you're not going to have the result that you would like to have initially. And some commanders, the average commanders, might just say, okay, I did my best, I'm going home. But the best ones are the ones that just keep plugging away until they succeed in doing what they're intending to do. And we're going to see this goes both ways. Effective leaders have to take risks. But the most effective ones are very prudent. They're going to weigh all the costs and benefits, and they're going to move in the right direction. They follow orders. And there should be one more, trust. And usually the trust is going to be because of all of these other traits that they're exhibiting. Okay? And the list could go on and on. So, let's start with armies. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with armies, then I'm going to do corps, then I'm going to do divisions, I'm going to do divisions, and I'm going to do brigades and some regiments. I believe, and many would agree, even though he had very little, no experience in commanding an army, that George Meade was a very, very effective leader at the Battle of Gettysburg. And I'll say that for a variety of reasons. One, remember, he comes after the first day, the evening of July 1. The battlefield had already been littered with dead and wounded. Fighting had been occurring. But he ensured that Reynolds and then Hancock came to command the field in his absence. And as he got to the battlefield, he very quickly came up with a plan on what he was going to be doing on July the 2nd, and then July the 3rd, and then after that. But what's interesting about Meade is that maybe because he was new to command, he listened. He periodically got all of his division and corps commanders together and he listened to them. And sometimes he shouldn't have listened to them, but in other cases they gave him some very sound advice. And that willingness to modify your plan in the face of information that suggests otherwise is important. Always gathering information. Unlike Lee, as I mentioned, Lee never got all of his corps and division commanders together at all. They were all working independently, and he paid the price for it. In Meade's case, he brought them all together on several occasions, especially the evening of the 1st, when he got to the battlefield, the evening of July the 2nd. And he's asking, should we stay? Should we modify the plan? What should we be doing the next day? And bringing in his subordinates in a positive way to draw from their information. Wise use of resources. This is a man that stripped units from all over the battlefield. If they weren't engaged, he was going to pull them out, and we'll see the 12th Corps in Culp's Hill on July the 2nd. Here it is, the evening, it's getting dark. He doesn't think that the Confederates are going to attack Culp's Hill. And what does he do? He strips virtually the entire 12th Corps off of Culp's Hill. A willingness to move troops around to put them where they're needed. Well, let's just go on to, nope, there he is. I hate to say that Lee was the worst. I'm not going to ever say Lee is the worst at anything. I'll just say that Lee was not at his best. How about that? Some would say that he was ill. Some would say that Stewart was gone. He didn't have eyes and ears. Some would say that early on, July 1, when A.P. Hill and Henry Heath came onto the battlefield, he was relegated to a no-win situation, or at least a difficult situation, because they were not following his orders. But there were some things that did not work out very well for Lee that he did have control over. One's the effective use of information. If you watch, how many have watched the movie Gettysburg? So many wonderful scenes there, but about Longstreet, and Longstreet is telling him, if I try to take the hills, I'm going to get slaughtered. We need to move around. And Lee said, nope. I know that I sent a reconnaissance out early in the morning of July the 2nd under Captain Johnston. I know the Union flank is not close to Little Round Top. If he had listened to him, the difference, there may have been a great difference. As it was, Little Round Top was close to being captured, but was not. And if he had given him the opportunity to go around, there wouldn't have been probably a wheat field or a devil's den or peach orchard. And the result might have been different. Another is a prudent risk taker. Some have questioned, many have questioned, that charge on the 3rd day. Was it prudent? Well, General Wright, Ambrose Wright, on July the 2nd was successful, actually pierced the heights on Cemetery Ridge on July the 2nd. Was that a prudent risk, knowing that you had 6,000 federal troops right at the copse of trees, knowing that the entire area bristled with artillery? He did know that. Effective planner. One of Lee's biggest problems was he didn't know, and an effective leader needs to know his subordinates, know their abilities. When he had Stonewall Jackson, when he had James Longstreet, he could basically say to them, here's your objective, okay? I want you to take that hill. How you take it, that's up to you. But I'm going to give you the broad outline. Well, when Stonewall Jackson is killed, when he reorganizes the Army, when now he's got a corps under A.P. Hill and another one under Richard Ewell, he tried to do the same thing. He gave them the broad outline, and he asked them to fill in the blanks. They weren't able to fill in the blanks. If he had told Ewell on July the 1st, at the end of the day, not take the hill if practicable, if he said take the hill, we may have seen a different result. Who knows? Effective use of resources. If you look at the troops that were lined up to make that bloody charge on July the 3rd, he had troops in line that had been decimated on July the 1st. Pettigrew, that had lost probably 50-60% of their men. Davis's brigade, Brackenbro's brigade. These were units that were not in any shape to make a charge. But there are other units that were barely exposed to gunfire. Mahone's brigade, Thomas's brigade, they were in the rear. Not a good, effective use of resources. So I'll just say at this point, not at his best. I don't want to have any fistfights here. Okay, at the corps level, how do you not start with John Reynolds, the first infantry general to reach the field? Very, very decisive. He knew what he wanted to do. He's going to defend those heights. Great deal of courage. And this is what really killed him. Because many corps commanders, where do you find them at the front line? No, you find them in the rear, where they should be. But here he is leading his troops. He's so anxious to get the Iron Brigade into position that he's leading them forward and takes a bullet and dies instantly. Winfield Hancock. He's going to arrive in the evening of July 1st. The federal troops, the units on the field, the 1st and the 11th Corps, are decimated. I mean, units have almost been destroyed. So many thousands have been killed and wounded. And the men who are on Cemetery Hill are totally demoralized. And here's a man who rides to this hill, and instantly these men talk about the surge of confidence as he reorganized the troops. Now, he had a little trouble with General Howard, who thought he was in command, but that's another lecture. All right, those are the best. Let's talk about the worst. I'm not a big fan of A.P. Hill, never have been a fan of A.P. Hill, whether he was a division commander or a corps commander, so I'm a little biased here. But here was a man who, on July the 1st, basically allowed Henry Heath to march toward Gettysburg unprepared. The risk that he took without a proper reconnaissance. Now, many of you may know that on June the 30th, the day before the Battle of Gettysburg, one brigade under James Pettigrew marched to Gettysburg. Before they got to Gettysburg, they looked in the distance and they saw, whoop, there's federal troops there. They're not militia. I think the cavalry. He comes back with that information, and Pettigrew was new to the Army, even though he is highly intelligent. Nobody believed him. A.P. Hill didn't believe him, nor did his commander, Henry Heath, and history occurs. Led from the rear. This is a man who had syphilis, and periodically it would flare up. You didn't know what syphilis was back then, but periodically it would flare up, and rather than say, okay, Henry Heath or Pender or Richard Anderson, you're in command of the Corps, he didn't do that. He tried to command even though he was in no shape to do it. And this guy according to my opinion, the only thing he knew was there was no finesse. You just send troops forward. You're going to bludgeon the enemy. And that's what happened during Pender's division charge to capture Seminary Hill on the afternoon of July 1. So not a big fan of him. I don't think that he was anywhere close to being an effective Corps commander. This is an example, and actually I could also say this about Henry Heath, but this is the very beginning of the battle. You have Archer's brigade, you have Davis's brigade, both of Heath's brigade. There's no skirmishers. I mean, there's no reconnaissance. They're just blundering toward this battlefield unaware. It was A.P. Hill that should have made sure that he knew what was in front of them. Well, even though I'm going to talk mainly about infantry, and there's differences of opinion, but I think I'm pretty safe if I say Jeb Stewart was not a very effective cavalry commander at this particular campaign. Poor use of command. He had 5 cavalry brigades, okay? And he says to Lee, I would like to go off and collect information. And Lee was very clear, I'm going to let you do it, but you stay on Richard Ewell's 2nd Corps flank. You stay with him. He didn't listen, and before he left, he takes 3 of his brigades. He leaves Lee with 2 brigades, and guess which 3 he took? Did he take his best or his worst with him? And who does he leave with Lee? His worst, his least effective, the least disciplined, the least experienced. He leaves with Lee, and Lee didn't trust him, and that was a real problem. Didn't follow orders, didn't use his command properly. Again, I would say that this is a commander who was not very effective at the Corps level. All right, let's go to the division level, if I could. Some would say one of the heroes, and it's very nice when you go up on McPherson's Ridge, and there across from Chambersburg Road, you see a very nice memorial to John Buford, who unfortunately died during the fall of 1863, so never saw the end of the war. If you think about the movie Gettysburg, I forgot his name, the actor. You all know who? Yes, thank you, Sam Elliott. Of all the actors, I thought he was the closest to Buford in his persona. I don't know if Buford was crying, quite frankly, when he saw Reynolds and the Wadsworth's division coming up. But this was a man very clearly, very, very decisive. He knew what he wanted to do, and there was no shortchanging that. In the movie, one of his commanders, Colonel Gamble, says, well, wait a minute, we can't do this. And he says, we're going to hold this line right here. Very decisive, tenacious. During the movie, and when you read about it, he is up. He's got a cavalry division, but he's up against a Confederate corps. He's up on the cupola of the seminary. He knows what's coming up. He knows that there are 25,000 rebels coming up, and he's got maybe 4,000 men against them, but he knows how important those heights are, and he's going to fight to the death. Effective use of resources, I'll show this in a little bit, and very, very inspirational. The men saw him, they believed in him, and because of him, I believe they stayed their course. You can see Gamble and Devon. Do you see the cavalry units? Look how they're deployed across. They're spread out. You can't really see the artillery. He's got 6 guns under Califf. He's got 4 along Chambersburg Pike, but he's got another couple he puts all the way out by the 8th New York to give the impression that there's more troops than there really are. And they're going to fight tenaciously to hold the position, and they do until John Reynolds comes in and replaces them. And even then, they continue to work on the flank. So probably, to my way of thinking, probably the most effective division commander on the field that day. Now, this guy you may not know too much about. Samuel Crawford. How many know about Samuel Crawford? Let me see some hands. Okay. A physician, by training, was not a professional soldier, very, very decisive, and there's no question about his courage. But let me tell you what he did. Here it is. The wheat field, the bloody wheat field, has finally been taken by the Confederates. Devil's Den has been taken by the Confederates. And you have Little Round Top. You know, the other wheat field, Devil's Den, Peach Orchard, there's very little strategic value there. What was important was Little Round Top. And after the Confederates, this is late in the day of July 2nd, these guys are exhausted. Look at that, Anderson, Kershaw, Semmes, look at Wolford. They're now coming up, they're going to have this concerted effort on Little Round Top. This is after Strong Vincent. This is after the 20th Maine. And there he is. You see where it says McCandless? This is the Pennsylvania Reserve Division. McCandless is one of these brigades. He sees these Confederates coming up toward him. Without orders, he orders a charge. In fact, he grabs the flag from one of the flag bearers of one of these Pennsylvania regiments, and they're literally fighting over it because the flag bearer doesn't want to give up this flag, and he's actually charging forward, dragging this flag bearer with him because he's going to lead the charge against these Confederates. Ultimately, they barrel into him, and they retreat, again saving the day. So here was someone, was it a prudent risk taker? Maybe, maybe not, but it was an action that needed to be taken. No one can question his courage. All right, so those are two of the best. Let's talk about those that may not have been so good. And probably one of the worst division commanders in any army that day is Henry Heath. Henry Heath, they say, was the only Confederate general that ever called Robert E. Lee by his first name. Everyone else called him General Lee. He called him Robert. But this is a man who is leading the advance to Gettysburg along Chambersburg Pike on July the 1st. Early in the morning, he's got 4 brigades. And he's so in disarray that the column is actually led by a battery of artillery. Who ever heard of a battery of artillery leading a column? But that's what you found. Eventually, they're going to approach Her Ridge. He did not collect information. The first bullet, very ineffective use of information. He had no information. He had no idea who was in front of him. But he knew from Pettigrew, one of his brigade commanders, that there was not militia in Gettysburg, and he told him it's cavalry. In fact, what was interesting, if you read about this, is when Pettigrew comes back after there's reconnaissance, there's A.P. Hill, there's Henry Heath, and there's General Pettigrew, and Pettigrew says there's cavalry in the town, and Heath says, no, there isn't. I asked permission of you, A.P. Hill, to take my entire division down that road and capture Gettysburg the next morning. And A.P. Hill says, sure, whatever you want to do. And that's why Gettysburg was fought. Inexperienced, he led a division very shortly at Chancellorsville, the battle before Gettysburg. Not much experience there, but very rash. Now, if you watch the movie Gettysburg, do you remember that scene? And I hate to keep coming back to it, but I love that movie. I believe it really does do a very, very effective job of visualizing what some of the things that happen. If you haven't seen it in a while, I'd suggest you do it. But here is Robert E. Lee talking to Henry Heath. You remember that? Now, Robert E. Lee does not criticize people. When he's not happy with you, he usually gets rid of you. Usually you're a cashier and you go to another theater of the war. And he basically said, General Heath, did you not understand me? Basically, can't you understand English? What was my order? My order was not to engage. And what did you do? He engaged. He had no idea what was in front of him. And a very, very poor execution. Because how many brigades did he have? 4. And early in the morning, the initial fight, how many did he throw into battle? 2. And what happened to these 2 brigades? Both of them were cut up. One of his generals was captured. It was not a pretty sight. If he had thrown the entire division, if you're going to fight, throw in your entire division. Again, I hate to do what I'm doing because it's hindsight, and hindsight is 20/20. But throwing forward 2 brigades is not going to be, it's not going to work, especially if you don't know what's in front of you. This is the second charge. This is in the afternoon. It's about 3 o'clock on July the 1st. Finally, he puts in Brackenbro. He puts in Pettigrew. He puts in Archer's brigade back. And finally, he's going to push forward. And guess what he does? He drives the Union forces off of McPherson Ridge. Now, yeah, they were exhausted, but he had the manpower, the firepower to do it. If he had done it earlier in the morning, he probably could have driven all the way through, captured the heights before noon. Very poor commander, very poor planning, and he continued to do poorly through the rest of the war. Well, most of the best I've been talking about have been wearing blue, so I don't want you to think that I'm biased here, because some Union commanders didn't do so well, including Thomas Rowley, who commanded a division in the 1st Corps, and he's riding around Cemetery Hill saying, "I'm in command of the 1st Corps." It was actually Abner Doubleday. He's giving orders. Well, the story is a little muddled, but most of the men thought he was drunk. In fact, a lieutenant of infantry from a Wisconsin unit, the 6th Wisconsin, actually arrested him and took him to the rear. So I would say he probably wasn't a very good commander if you're under arrest. He was ultimately exonerated, but he never served with the Army of the Potomac again. So that's an easy one. There are other not-so-great division commanders. One of them is Robert Rhoades, and he screwed up twice, basically, both on July the 1st and on July the 2nd. Did not use information very well, and let me explain what he did and didn't do. If you look at the map on the left, this is it says map 6.1, you all see that? So here he is, he's coming on to Oak Ridge, okay? He has 5 brigades. One of them, Ramser's brigade, is not up yet. But he's got 4 brigades. He has no idea what's on Oak Ridge. He's on Oak Hill. And what he's going to do is he's going to send Daniel's brigade, Iverson's brigade, O'Neill's brigade, 3 of them. He's going to move them down toward the unfinished railroad, towards Chambersburg Pike in the case of Daniel. Iverson, O'Neill, they're going to attack where Baxter is. So they're aiming toward Oak Ridge. Problem is, he has no idea what's on Oak Ridge. It could be nobody, it could be a division, it could be a regiment. And what happens is suddenly O'Neill's brigade is starting the charge before Daniel, before Iverson. And guess what happens to them? They're repulsed. Iverson sees them. He quickly says, "We better get moving." He charges with his North Carolinians. And one of the bloodiest repulses, if you go to Oak Ridge, one of the bloodiest repulses, he lost probably about 70% of his men marching across Forney's Field in beautiful line of battle. And after the battle, these men, after the initial volley of Baxter's men, literally they were lined up in a row with their feet, these men were dead, with their feet in a beautiful line. Why? Well, Rhoades did not have good command of his units on that particular day. Finally, he's going to get them all together, and finally he's going to drive all the Union troops off of Oak Ridge and drive them toward the town. But initially, he did a poor job of planning, of using resources, of knowing what was going on. Bad commander. On the right is probably, there were a lot of what-ifs at Gettysburg. The evening of July the 2nd, when Hayes's Louisiana Tigers, tough soldiers, and Avery's North Carolinians are going to be attacking the Federal 11th Corps on Cemetery Ridge. They actually drive some of these soldiers back. They're climbing the hill. They capture several of these guns up on the top of the hill. There they are. They've captured Cemetery Hill, one of the most strategic positions on this battlefield. Now, the Ewell, who commands the 2nd Corps, never intended for only two brigades to attack. The town, and I don't have it here, there were three other brigades under Rhoades. He was to move these brigades over to the left, and do you see where it says Smith? And you see where the flank of Hayes is? They were supposed to come down and smash into the other side, the northwest side of Cemetery Hill. And imagine if 5 Confederate brigades had captured that hill. What might have happened? Who knows? But what didn't happen was these units were never engaged. Why? For one thing, Rhoades never commanded them. He took Stephen Ramseur, one of his brigadier generals. He says, you command this movement of these troops through the town. Well, it took a whole lot more time than anybody had anticipated. And by the time they got through the town and in position, it was basically too late. So we're going to call him one of the worst? I would. But on other battlefields, this was a man who was a very effective division commander, but not on this particular day. Okay, let's talk about brigades then. How many of you know George Stannard? Okay, not a lot of people know him, but this was a man who did not obey orders. And on other fields of battle, the Union commanders oftentimes didn't take the initiative. This is a man who took the initiative very decisively. It took a lot of courage for him to do this. And let me explain what he did. There are 2 maps here. Over on the left, it's July the 2nd. Okay? It's probably about 6 or 7 o'clock at night. Wright's brigade is these are Georgians driving from Seminary Ridge. They're crossing Emmitsburg Pike. They're taking the same route that Pickett took the day after. The difference is, look over on the left-hand side. Do you see how these 2 regiments, the 22 Georgia and part of the 3rd Georgia, they actually find a hole in the Union line. They drive to the top of Cemetery Ridge. They did what Pickett's entire division was not able to the day after, and that was to capture the ridge. But George Stannard sent, as you can see, his 13th Vermont smashing into Wright's men, causing them to retreat. No orders, took the initiative, and did what he needed to do. But what he did on July the 3rd was classic. And they don't teach this in any military school. On the right, you can see Pickett's charge. They're they're crossing the road. That yellow line is Emmitsburg Road. And do you see, I wish I had a pointer, but do you see Stannard? Can you see him on the map? Now, he's actually facing this way. He's along with the other Union troops. And what happens is the Confederates do an oblique. They start moving northward. And so there were Confederate troops in front of him, but as they move to the north, toward the copse of trees, there's no troops in front of him. And what does he see? He sees the Confederate flank of Kemper's brigade. And he orders, look at those 2 regiments. He orders them all out of line. He swivels them to the north, and he charges. And imagine what happens to Kemper's brigade when you've got thousands of these blue uniformed Vermont men, Green Mountain Boys, attacking their flank. And one of the reasons why Pickett lost this particular day was because Stannard took the initiative and beat back this command. Strong Vincent, I'd have to be court-martialed if I didn't put him up as one of the best commanders. So let me just show you what he did, obviously. This is a man who basically, whoops, go back. Come on. Okay. All of these things, being an effective commander. Basically what he did, and I think many of you know this, is up on Little Round Top. Remember, one of the most strategic, important areas of the battlefield. There's nobody over there. Sickles' 3rd Corps did not have any men on that strategic height. All that was left there was a signal station and General Gouverneur Warren. Warren looks in the distance. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he can see, looks like a little glint of steel, and sure enough, he realizes that there is a Confederate attack coming his way toward Little Round Top. What does he do? He sends an orderly off of Little Round Top quickly to find the division commander of one of the 5th Corps divisions, with orders, send the brigade quickly to Little Round Top ASAP. This aide goes flying down Little Round Top, and as he is approaching Wheatfield Road, he encounters Strong Vincent, who's marching toward the wheat field. Strong Vincent says, "Whoa, where are you going?" He says, "I've got orders for General Sykes." He says, "Well, what are the orders?" He says, I can't tell you. It's for General Sykes." He says, "I want to know." And finally, the guy's a pain in the rear end. He says, he's ordering a brigade up on the heights. He says, "Well, I'm going to go up there." So again, without orders, he goes up, and the rest is history. Just at the perfect time, if you lean toward the Union, not the perfect time if you lean toward the Confederates, he gets his brigade up on the heights, and he's going to deploy them very quickly, and he's going to beat off attack after attack after attack. We talk about bravery, and one of the tragedies of this battle is the 16th. You can see the 16th Michigan. You see that on the right of his line. Through a misunderstanding, the flag bearer starts moving up the hill. Many of the men are moving up the hill after him, and there's now a hole in the line. The Confederates are coming up the hill, and there's Strong Vincent jumping on one of the boulders. He doesn't have a sword. He doesn't have a pistol. What does he have? He's got his wife's riding crop, because that's what he had usually in his hand. And he's encouraging his men, very exposed, to come on back, seal the line. He takes a bullet. They carry him back to Erie, Pennsylvania, and actually dies. But one of the heroes, one of the great leaders of Gettysburg, someone who saved the day. George Greene. Many people have heard about the heights of Little Round Top and Strong Vincent and what he did. And certainly everybody's heard about Joshua Chamberlain. But this guy does not get the recognition he deserves, because he basically did the same thing under much more severe difficulty than Strong Vincent. So what did he do? Look over to the left, if you would. This is the 12th Corps. This is the afternoon of July the 2nd. They're on Culp's Hill. They're expecting an attack. Look at all those brigades. Look at all those regiments there. And you see Greene up on at the highest, the steepest point of Culp's Hill. And basically, as the Confederates attack the Union left, the wheat field, the peach orchard, the Devil's Den, etc., Meade does what he should be doing. He's pulling these troops away that are not engaged, and he's driving them south to reinforce the line that's being attacked. But guess who's left? Only one unit out of all of these brigades, and it's Greene's brigade, the oldest general in the Union Army. And he is told, hold the line. So he's going to improvise. He's going to stretch his line as much as he can. And what he doesn't realize is that one Confederate division under Johnson's division is going to attack in the twilight. But he holds the line, just barely, but he holds the line. Decisive, effective use of resources, very tenacious, did all the things a great leader does. And unfortunately, many of us don't know who he is, but he certainly deserves a lot of recognition. Joe Kershaw commands South Carolinians. I'll go through him quickly. He's over to the left. You see him on the left, on the right of Emmitsburg Road? And so he is supposed to be attacking the peach field, the peach orchard. He's up against some infantry, but look at all of the artillery. He's got 40 artillery pieces he's up against. Infantry against artillery, quite a mismatch. And he's repulsed. But remember, we talked about tenacious and effective planning? That's what he did. And over to the right, as Barksdale is advancing, he's going to attack again, and ultimately he's going to be victorious. Speaking about Barksdale, probably the most, how should I put this, enthusiastic general on that battlefield. He commands a brigade of Mississippians. He's begging Longstreet. He's begging General McLaws, please send me in, send my Mississippians in, because we can smash the Union line. Very decisive. And basically what he's going to do over on the left, you can see Barksdale. Some people will call this the greatest charge in the entire war. I don't know if I would say that. But through this open field, he's going to be advancing through artillery fire. He's going to drive into Graham's brigade. He's going to basically almost destroy this brigade. He's going to turn, and you see the Union troops over on the other side of Trossel Lane. He's going to smash into another division. He's going to send that flying. And then he's going to, over on the right, he's going to continue the charge toward Plum Run, where ultimately he is going to be killed. His men were forced to retreat. But here's a man who, if we look at some traits, very decisive. He knew what he wanted to do, what he was going to smash the Union line. He did that. Great deal of courage, very tenacious. Not so much of a prudent risk taker, because he didn't, obviously, again, hindsight, he didn't know what was on the other side of the thickets on Plum's Run. He didn't realize there was a full, fresh Union brigade that were out to redeem themselves, because this was the brigade that had been captured at Harper's Ferry the year before, and they wanted redemption. But still, a very effective leader. Let's get to the bad people. Not bad, they're all good people, but not so great as commanders. John Brackenbro, he was so ineffective that even though they kept putting him in command of this brigade of Virginians, they would never make it permanent. They just did not believe in him, Lee or Heath or anybody. And so he was a make-do kind of guy, and boy, did he do a rotten job. Remember I talked about the afternoon of July the 1st, where Heath finally is organizing his men over on the left. You got Brackenbro at the top, you got Pettigrew, you got Fry, and they're all supposed to be charging at about the same time. But not Brackenbro, very, very timid, very slow. He was almost afraid to move forward. And you see Stone there? And to the left of the S on Stone is the 150th Pennsylvania. He was going so slow that this unit could move back and forth. They could move over to Chambersburg Pike and attack and repel a Union force coming from the north. And then he could turn back where he is now and attack and take on Brackenbro. But probably the worst experience, and we'll talk a little bit about this in just a second. I'm going to go fast now because I'm running out of time. Is, again, bad planning. The most vulnerable position in any charge is on the flank, right? So who do you not put on the flank? The worst brigade in the Army. And who did, it wasn't really Lee, it was A.P. Hill. Who did they put on the flank, the left flank? Brackenbro. And who got defeated? And we'll see how. Brackenbro. And that destabilized that entire line. Very bad. William Mahone, great division commander later on in the war. But here's a man who would not fight his brigade. When Wright's brigade was taking the heights, Wright is desperate for reinforcements. If he had additional reinforcements, he felt he could have held Cemetery Ridge. He sends an aide to General Anderson, who's the division commander, and Anderson says to this guy, I want you to move forward and take the heights, support Wright. He doesn't move. Meanwhile, General Posey is attacking the Bliss Farm, and he needs reinforcements. He goes over to Mahone, and Mahone says, no, I can't help you because I'm supposed to be going to reinforce Wright. He doesn't do either. And his men stay in position. Now, I don't know how you call this guy anything but incompetent. If it were me, I probably would have cashiered him. Extra Billy Smith, basically, This is a former governor of the state of Virginia, actually becomes Virginia again, and some would say that this is a man who single-handedly lost the battle for the Confederates, because on July the 1st, Early's division is driving the Union forces out of everywhere north of the town. They're at the brickyard, driving them out. Early is ready to send in the rest of his units, and Extra Billy says, wait a minute, he's out on York Pike. He says, wait a minute, I see all these Union troops coming. We need reinforcements. So if you're Jubal Early, what are you going to do? If they're coming in on the flank, you're going to send Gordon, you're going to send other troops instead of pushing the fight, instead of moving towards Cemetery Hill. So didn't use information very well, didn't collect it very well. And then on the afternoon of July the 3rd, he's going to rashly counterattack and lose hundreds of men in an attack that should never have happened. Two other brigade commanders, Alfred Iverson and Edward O'Neill. Classic examples of leading from the rear. In the case of the guy on the right, when his men were being slaughtered, there he was standing watching. And they asked after the battle, they said, well, why weren't you with your men? Why weren't you helping them? Well, we didn't have horses, so I couldn't move forward. Iverson wanted to blame everybody and anybody for the decimation, the slaughter of his men. In both cases, I won't say they're cowards, but certainly they did not get anywhere close to the fighting. They did not use their men very effectively. Come on. James Fisher, last brigade commander. We all know about Joshua Chamberlain, right? What did Joshua Chamberlain do? He held the line at Little Round Top, and most people think that was it, right? Well, on the evening of July the 2nd, it's twilight. Chamberlain's men are exhausted. They order this guy, he has a brigade of the Pennsylvania Reserves under Crawford. They said, we're afraid of all those rebels from the Alabama, the 15th Alabama that was attacking Chamberlain. We're worried about them. They're up on Big Round Top. You take your men up to Big Round Top. Guess what he did? Nothing. What did Chamberlain do? He said to his men, look, I can't order you to go forward, but I'm going up there because I'm going to drive those rebels off of Big Round Top. And he looks back, his entire, whatever was left of his regiment, fighting all afternoon, evening, exhausted, climbing. If you climb Big Round Top, they weren't taking that path. They were climbing the steep hill to drive the Confederates off. Again, did not follow orders. And so I could talk about Joshua Chamberlain, obviously, very, very effective. I could talk about Franklyn Sawyer. They thought he was drunk because he takes his 8th Ohio. You see that arrow on the left? He's the one, without orders, is going to take his 8th Ohio that's on the skirmish line. He's going to run forward. He's going to see the flank of Brackenbro's brigade, and he's going to smash into the flank and drive them to the rear. Then he's going to take on the right, he's going to take on Davis's brigade. I mean, that's audacious. Is it prudent? Probably not. But he saw the opportunity and he took it. Rufus Doll, he's the one who captured the Confederates at the railroad cut because of his audacious actions. Almost done. And last, I can't forget this guy, because nobody, how many of you know Charles Tilden? Okay, good. He deserves recognition. This is the commander of the 16th Maine. Rhoades has finally gotten his act together. Look at all these troops. You've got O'Neill, you've got Ramseur, you've got Daniel. Look at this. They're all going to be in a concerted attack, driving the Union forces off of Oak Ridge toward the town. And look, there's only one regiment. You see that regiment, the 16th Maine? His orders, stay the course. Hold them back. He loses 80% of his men. 80%, but he follows orders. He does what he has to do. At the other extreme is Richard Smith, commander of the 71st Pennsylvania. So here he is. Remember we talked about George Greene? Remember Culp's Hill? Greene is there all by himself. So Meade is trying to get units to him, and one of the units that he's going to send to him is the 71st Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia Brigade. These guys don't have any guide, so it's dark. It's pitch dark. They're falling over roots. They're trying to find their way. Finally, one of the aides comes and takes them to where they're supposed to be on Culp's Hill to reinforce the line. And you can see, do you see over on the right, lower right, do you see the 71st Pennsylvania? You all see that? They're coming into position. As they approach the breastworks, they're so excited they let out a cheer. And guess what happens to them? The Confederates are right there, the 10th Virginia. They're only happy to oblige. They open fire, and a number of Pennsylvanians fall. And what does this gentleman do? He says, you know, this isn't a great place for us. We're going back. Without orders, where he was needed most was right there. And instead, he fell back. Was he ever cashiered? No. And so, just a snapshot of what I consider to be the best and the worst. We do have a few minutes for questions and controversy. Thank you. Be gentle now.
What's your opinion of McGowans Brigade through the battle itself? How did they perform?
McGowans Brigade? Okay. McGowans Brigade was a brigade of South Carolinians commanded by Abner Perrin. This was a man who, I could have put him up here. He's brand new. He's never commanded a brigade before. He's got Scales to his left. He's got Scales Brigade to his left. He has Lane to the right. And he is going to attack Seminary Ridge. Scales Brigade is decimated. They fall back. Lane's brigade sees cavalry, Union cavalry. They move over to the right. And there is Perrin and the entire Union line. And he charges. And they break the line. They find a hole. They roll up the Union line. And basically single-handedly threw the Union troops off of Seminary Ridge. So definitely they performed very, very well. Big losses. No, they were not in Pickett's charge. They just weren't included. They were along Long Lane, you know, so they weren't included. I just don't know why. Thank you. Next question, yes.
So many to go over, but gravely absent to me is Sickles. Any reason why?
I knew it. Okay. Sickles is controversial. There are some people, I won't say an equal number, I would say the majority of people are talking about Dan Sickles, commander of the 3rd Corps, who did, I won't say he disobeyed orders. He did not disobey orders. What he did was he sent aid after aid after aid to Meade. I want you to come back. I want you to see my position. I don't think it's a good position. This was a man whose corps, and I'm going to make excuses for him, whose corps was decimated at Chancellorsville because he didn't have the heights. He did not feel that he was in a good position. He saw heights in front of him. He's asking his army commander, come over, tell me. He gets the commander of the artillery, Henry Hunt. Henry Hunt says, yeah, I think it is good for you to move forward, but I can't give you those orders. It's got to be Meade. Where he failed was he made that decision on his own to move forward. So I guess you could say that he disobeyed orders. So there are people who would say that from his experience, it was not a good move. But again, hindsight is wonderful. It's 2020. So because it's controversial, I decided I would take the most egregious, worst, and the best of the best. And Sickles, you know, I can sympathize with Sickles, you know, but I think on the whole he didn't do very well. I don't know if he was the very worst. A.P. Hill, the worst, no question. Anyone else? Okay, another one here.
Hi. Mine actually my question has to do with a little bit of speculation. But do you think that if Meade had been more aggressive in going after Lee after getting, think that have taken over the Army of Potomac? Or would
Okay.
have Meade stayed in?
The question is, what happened during the retreat? Would Meade, if Meade had been more aggressive, if he had attacked Lee when he was still pinned against the Potomac River, would Grant have taken over the Army? Probably wouldn't have had to take over the Army because he would have destroyed Lee. Again, this is something that I love, these what-if authors. Unless you're there, unless you understand what these armies were like. The First Corps, Federal First Corps, was destroyed. The Second Corps was in terrible shape. The Third Corps was destroyed. The 11th Corps was destroyed. You did have the 5th, the 6th Corps that were fairly fresh. But you also had a rat, a cornered rat, and I hate to call Lee a cornered rat, but he was cornered, and Meade knew that he was going to fight to the death, and he did not feel his army was exhausted. Even the 6th Corps, which had marched all day and all night to get to the battlefield, he was going to attack, but by the time he was ready to attack, Lee had already withdrawn. So I believe that Lincoln was too harsh on Meade. I think if he was on the field, if he had seen the men, and he had seen what Lee had done, he wasn't just sitting around. These were very impressive breastworks that he had constructed. I think Lee would have beaten him badly. So Grant probably would not have been called otherwise, I believe, if Meade. But Meade was one who was, he fought the best battle. He was a defensive general. Give him the heights. He doesn't want to be an aggressor. And some generals fight better that way. You take Lee, just the opposite. He didn't want to be on the defense. He wanted to be on the offense. Thank you. Any other question? Nope, another one? All right, right into the microphone. My ears are going.
Oliver Howard. What do you think of Oliver Howard?
Okay, Oliver Howard. Oliver Howard was commander of the 11th Corps. Received the Medal of Honor at Gettysburg because he had the foresight, apparently, to put his men up on Cemetery Hill at the end of July 1. I'm neutral on Howard. He didn't do a very good job of holding the northern part of the field, but he was up against some very aggressive Confederates. He also had in his unit some Germans, inexperienced soldiers whose fighting ability has not been tested as yet. They had been defeated at Chancellorsville. They were still very skitterish. So I think he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Was he one of the better generals? No. Was he one of the worst? No. I don't think I would have given him the Medal of Honor, however. But a lot of that, as you know, is political. How about Longstreet? That's a good question. James Longstreet. Well, one of the traits they say of an effective leader is someone who's not afraid to speak his mind. And I think the worst thing that a subordinate leader can do is not speak his mind. I think at Gettysburg, I won't say he was one of the best, but I won't say he's one of the worst. I think he certainly had serious problems with what Lee wanted to do. And he made sure that Lee understood the options. It wasn't his fault that Lee wasn't going to listen to him. And so it was his job as a soldier to carry out Lee's orders, even though, again, I hate to keep beating on the movie Gettysburg, but when he's sitting on that fence rail, you can feel the angst, you can feel the sorrow, because he knows the slaughter that's going to happen. And yet, he was a good soldier. So I would say, like Sickles, like Howard, not the worst, not the best. He did the best job he could under the circumstances. It may have turned out very differently if Lee had listened to him. If they didn't fight at Gettysburg. If you remember, earlier on it was Lee, take a defensive position, find high ground, and let Meade come at you. And what would Meade have done? Meade would have had to come at him. Again, I'm second guessing. I hate to do that. But so I'd put him in that in-between category. I'm trying to do black and white on this particular one. Any other questions? Okay, let's... Doubleday, Barlow. I'm not going there. It's too late in the day to do Pickett. Barlow, here you have Francis Barlow. Similar to the Third Corps. He is told, his position that he's told by his Corps commander, by General Schultz, is to take position around the almshouse, etc. And he looks ahead, and what does he see? He sees Blocker's Knoll. And he says, you know what? I like the high grounds. I'm going to take them. And who can fault him for that? But he disobeyed orders to do that. Now, he didn't know that he was going to be attacked in front and flank and ultimately driven back. Doubleday, I think he did the best job he could. Again, he is a division commander. As you all know, not the founder of baseball. I have to tell that for my wife, who always reminds me of that. But he's put in command of the First Corps. Again, he did the best job he can. And what was his thanks? He was removed from command of the First Corps that evening as soon as Meade reached the field, and General Wright, who's just okay, is put in command of the First Corps. So really an insult to Doubleday that he never really recovered from. Pickett, if I have to, he followed orders. His orders were not anything. He wasn't to collect information. He wasn't to make any plans. Although he was told to line up his brigades. But for the most part, I don't think he could have done anything differently than what he did. But he was not going to say to Longstreet, let's not do this, because he felt his men could do it. There's a controversy. Where was he? Was he in the rear? He was probably at the Kadoorie House. He was where he should have been. You don't want to have a division commander right up at the front. You don't want to have them all the way back with Lee. So he was right close to the attacking column, and he was unfortunately at the wrong place at the wrong time, and he never ever recovered from it. And one of the hoaxes, one of the July 4th hoaxes, is they found his battle report. And this is something no one will ever find, because he did file a battle report, and when they read it, I don't know if it was Longstreet or Lee, they basically said, no one's ever going to read this. And so he never really did report on what he saw and what he did that particular day. But he never recovered from that. You could never recover from what he saw and witnessed. Well, thank you very much.